We begin tonight with a checkpoint investigation into the way the Ministry of Health has been working with the country's district health boards. We do this off the back of our extensive work on health board deficits and our interviews revealing tension between the Ministry and senior figures in some DHBs. And we do this off the back of all the questions over the past few weeks about how the public health system contains so many surprises, rotting and leaking buildings, budget blowouts, massive shortfalls in capital funding and issues with screening programs. How were the messages getting through, not getting through, or getting lost in translation? Well, we can't answer that question tonight. There will be so many reasons why. But after months of investigations, tonight we can exclusively reveal one surprise. How the Ministers of Health and Finance were told the Canterbury District Health Board would manage capital spending within existing funding and resources when the CEO and almost everyone on the board thought they couldn't. We begin with an email. If you're watching, you can see it. If you're listening, it's dated the 10th of December 2015. And it was sent at 7:10 a.m. The sender is Michael Hundleby from the Ministry of Health. The recipient is redacted, but Checkpoint can reveal it was sent to the personal email address of the chairman of the Canterbury District Health Board, Murray Cleverly. It reads, Murray, draft letter below we were going to discuss today. Cheers. And then we have the draft letter itself. It's written to Jonathan Coleman, Health Minister, and Bill English, Finance Minister, and the name at the bottom of the letter is that of the man whose personal email account it's been sent to, Murray Cleverly. It's a draft letter, yes, but the next day, December 11th, and we have this too, it reappears on Canterbury DHB letterhead, signed by Murray Cleverly this time, the chair it had been emailed to, and sent on to Ministers English and Coleman. And what did Mr Cleverly change in the letter he'd been emailed from the Ministry of Health? Well, we've put them side by side and highlighted the words that have remained the same. They are identical. CDHB has become Canterbury DHB, yours sincerely has become kind regards, and every other word has remained the same. And here's why this letter, sent to Murray Cleverly's personal email account, then sent on by Mr Cleverly to two ministers, is so important. One, in post-earthquake Christchurch, it was committing the Canterbury DHB to managing capital spending within existing Crown funding and the DHB's own resources. And two, no one on the board knew Murray Cleverly was sending it.
Because the letter was dated December the 10th, and it wasn't until the following February, I think, that we found out about it, myself and other board members.
Anna Crichton, Canterbury District Health Board member. So the board did not know that their chair had sent this to the Ministers of Health and Finance?
No.
And yet in it, their chair is effectively saying, we don't need any more money.
Yes, exactly right. And that's, we couldn't believe that he could do that. But he did.
That's Anna Crichton. And I also spoke to another board member, Joe Kane. Joe, when did you first see this letter that the former chairman, Murray Cleverly, sent to the ministers in December 2015, dated 11th of December 2015?
Yes, that was about 4, 5, maybe 6 months after it had been sent.
That's when you first saw it?
Yep.
When board members first saw the letter is inexact now, and the time frame varies. But of the board members I've spoken to on and off the record, none saw it before it was sent, and none knew it was being sent. And what was your reaction when you found out this had happened?
My reaction? I was pretty pissed off.
In preparing this story, the board members I was able to speak to have all told me that, although some in less colourful terms. And what they've also all said is that they don't know where the letter came from. Murray Cleverly sent it under his name on DHB letterhead, but it didn't reflect their position.
I don't know who wrote that letter, but I do know that after further inquiries, I did find out that the letter did not come from the Canterbury District Health Board secretarial team.
Anna Crichton. Joe Kane. Who wrote the letter?
It's pretty obvious who wrote the letter.
So who wrote it? A letter sent from the ministry on December 10th to a personal email address, sent back to Wellington the following day, this time on CDHB letterhead, and to Bill English and Jonathan Coleman. Murray cleverly politely declined to talk to me, but he did talk to our producer Bridget Burke, and he told her...
Well, basically I work pretty closely with the ministry as well, and so when you're discussing different things, and you notice I haven't confirmed or denied anyone who wrote that letter, but I certainly put my signature to it.
And it's the signature that makes that letter to the ministers so important.
In actual fact is I think it's irrelevant who wrote it. It's actually what's important is who signed it. And so at the end of the day, I put my name to it, so I have to take some ownership for that letter.
So Bill English and Jonathan Coleman had a letter signed by the chair of the DHB on DHB letterhead about managing capital demands that the rest of the board didn't know about.
Clearly shows it was a cut in the pace, that it was a direction, and that's what our chair wrote, sadly, for the CDHB. And it sadly has been the crux of our whole relationship issues with the MOH, who work kind of in a different way than I think that a ministry should work between their ministers and the shareholders.
When you found out this letter from the chairman of the board to the two most important ministers in the life of a district health board had been sent without the board being consulted, what was your reaction?
Well, we just couldn't believe that anybody could do that. We just couldn't believe it.
Was it correct, the letter? Were you able to do the capital expenditure required from within existing?
No. We'd been fighting for more money. We were in exceptional circumstances after the earthquake. Exceptional circumstances. And at no way would we have been able to work within our means on the budget that we had, and especially the capital budget.
That's Anna Crichton following Joe Kane, both women elected members of the board rather than appointed, and therefore they both told me able to speak out without worrying what the ministry thinks of them. They were the only board members prepared to go on the record, but nowhere near the only people I spoke to. All have told the same story. But Murray cleverly said he had a choice, take the board with him or do a deal with Wellington. The former chairman seems to feel they weren't both possible in December 2015.
Absolutely. The most uncomfortable thing is when you don't take a board with you on a whole journey. But sometimes under urgency and under importance, it's important to actually that's why you are the chair. You need to make some decisions sometime for the best for the organisation, in your opinion.
So the end justifies the means, the former chair says.
We were trying to get the outpatients approval over the line. To build the outpatients building at a cost of, about 90 million, or 70 to 90 million. And I was trying to get the support I had to get the support from the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Finance to get that across the line. There was nothing untoward in it. There was nothing exceptionally exciting about it, except it was just trying to arrange the outcomes that are suitable for Canterbury. And basically I have to give a bit of assurance to the ministers that I wasn't going to be back the next day with another request for another 100 million, even though we knew we were actually well short on getting all the work that needs to be done there, which they're discovering, which we knew anyway. We were about 250 million shy.
But whatever his motives, the chairman wrote to the ministers without his board knowing, committing to an end in terms of managing within existing funding that many of his senior colleagues didn't think was supportable.
I still take the right as a chair to be able to step, if I need to, assert my over-exert my authority or whatever it takes to get a job done. Look, we can stand by process and protocols all we like, but at the end of the day, we've got a big job to do, and it was important to get it done.
The board didn't know, but at 1:40 p.m. on the 10th of December, Murray cleverly forwarded the draft letter to the DHB CEO, David Mates. Mr. Mates appears to think it's fully Murray Cleverly's own work, although we can't confirm that. and replies in an email that's explicitly incredulous. It's unclear, he wrote, what the letter is responding to. Has a letter been received from the ministers, or has this been requested from the Ministry of Health? And then David Mates lists all the reasons the letter shouldn't be sent. Generic ones, I quote, the DHB is not in control of decisions. Financial ones, increased financial risk. And then explicitly the CEO writes, it is really difficult for ministers to understand the size of the facility damage we are grappling with. 44 buildings demolished or soon to be demolished. And David Mates also writes, there is approximately a total of an additional $200 million that will be required. So David Mates did not mince his words or his assessment of their financial requirements. But the next day, with no changes, the chairman of the board sent the letter anyway.
You know, living within our means is one of our core objectives. But that's as long as you're funded correctly. And we were not being funded correctly. So that's simple.
So the board didn't know. The CEO said, don't do it, and explained why very explicitly in writing, and yet Murray Cleverly did it anyway. He took the letter that had been sent to his personal email address the previous day. It was put on CDHB letterhead. Murray Cleverly signed it and sent it to Minister English and Minister Coleman. And clearly Murray Cleverly feels it was the right thing for him to have done. But why? Did he feel coerced in any way? Our producer Bridget Burke asked him.
I think I always felt coerced. No, I don't think coerced. I think the word was I always felt squeezed. I always felt like the meat in the sandwich.
The ministry as one slice, the DHB as the other. In this case, the chairman alone jammed in the middle. We wanted an overview on this, so we went to a man who's worked for many years with senior staff in all 20 DHBs, Ian Powell. And we asked him about Ministry of Health relations with DHBs under the leadership of former ministry boss, Chai Chua, who resigned last December.
It was a poor relationship. I think many district health boards believe that they were being cajoled, they were being bullied, they were being harassed, they were being pressured.
And the head of the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists said the most pressure was applied when DHBs were speaking out, particularly around funding inadequacies, which was the issue facing Canterbury.
It took a brave person to actually put your hand up and make a bit of a noise about that.
The more noise you made, the worse it was for your prospects. Catch-22, because boards are meant to be advocates for the communities they represent.
They have to speak out on behalf of the needs of the population they are serving. And I think the experience has been over the last 9 years at least, that was increasingly more and more difficult.
Ian Powell is not alone in telling us this. Checkpoint has reported on this at length over the past few months. We even asked the former minister about it in an interview with Jonathan Coleman last year. I've been told the ministry is very difficult to deal with and also running scared. Are they stuck between a rock and the hard place? Are they having to pass on bad news to DHBs and protect you from the repercussions?
No, I wouldn't see it like that.
Jonathan Coleman last year. We've made repeated attempts to contact him this week. He hasn't responded. But back in Canterbury, Murray Cleverly is strong in his personal belief that if he hadn't signed and sent that letter, there would have been consequences.
And I suppose that's all subjective. The fact is that I believe if I didn't submit that letter, we wouldn't have had outpatients there today.
We can't say whether that's true, but Murray Cleverly believes it is, and that belief led him to sign a letter he's not able to tell us he wrote without board knowledge against the express and explicit wishes of his CEO, making commitments he felt he had no choice but to make. A DHB after major earthquakes, so much work to be done, not enough money to do it all.
And I don't think we would have got the outpatients over the line if I didn't do that, you know.
And Murray Cleverly doesn't think there was anything unusual about his transaction with Michael Hundleby.
You could speak to a number of chairs around the country his role as special projects or whatever that means, and he was the man that had those conversations with a number of DHB chairs on a number of times, you know.
It's symptomatic of how that ministry was working.
Joe Kane, other board members I spoke to, people inside the DHB, the CEO in writing in that email we referred to earlier, still don't know why their former chair sent an important and controversial letter of understanding without their agreement to the Ministers of Health and Finance that was identical to the draft he'd been sent from the Health Ministry the previous day.
It's a cut and paste, quite simply, John. It's a cut and paste exercise. Crude, rude, just lacking in any sort of integrity, lacking in any sort of real professional nous, and just, highlights to me just how difficult it's been for people in health. Winners and losers. It should never work like that.
Joe Kane, who is an elected board member on the CDHB. Now, Michael Hundleby, the Director of Critical Projects is his title now at the Ministry of Health, refused to be interviewed by Checkpoint for this investigation. But a short time ago, we received a statement from the Director General of Health, Stephen McKernan. Instead, he says, "I understand that the emails you quote regard a period in 2015 when Canterbury DHB required approval from the Minister of Finance to build the outpatients building. As is usual, the Finance Minister had expectations of the DHB as a prerequisite for approval of the capital investment. After discussion with the Canterbury DHB Chair, Ministry of Health officials agreed to draft a letter for the DHB covering these expectations for their consideration." Mr McKernan says he appreciates the pressure experienced by many DHB chairs and is mindful of that in its dealings with them. He says the ministry often acts as the minister's agent in its communications with the health sector.